So today I just wanted to have a little deeper discussion about strings, creating an inventory, and coming up with a plan. Whether you're new to the string business or whether you are looking to supply a pro shop or a club stringing business, I think that'll kind of start that discussion off. So there's really a lot of different components here. I was when I was looking at, well, let's see, what would be the most important things that I would want to tell others, when they're looking at string inventory. Strings are expensive when you start looking at reels and you start looking at different gauges, because you need to have this in a 16 gauge and you want it in the 17 gauge, and what are customers going to want? And then if you don't have that, what are you going to do? And how much do you really need in order to start your inventory? And look at your competition, look at your local competition as to what kind of strings that they offer. Look at your local market or target market. Is it club players? Is it recreational players? Is it college players? Is it kind of a mix of those? Because I think your strings is going to be different depending on kind of what market that you're targeting. If you're looking at just a recreational weekend kind of player or picks up the racket once or twice a year, you might look at just basic synthetics and more cost-effective strings. So there's a lot of those kind of things, I think. And so kind of knowing who what your market is and who you're going after.
You brought up a lot of good points. I think it's important to know who you're going to be stringing for, and also just understand a little bit the different types of strings that are out there, and what's popular with who these days. Certainly there's a ton of information that you can find online, but polyesters are obviously very, very, or not obviously if you're new to this, but polyesters are very, very popular with the professionals. Some of them do use them in a hybrid setup with natural gut still, but they're very popular with college players, mostly in full beds from what I've seen. So the mains and crosses are both the polyester string. Even younger juniors are getting into polyesters, and even I get grown adults, 40, 50, 60-year-olds who want some sort of polyester. We've had the discussion where I think we maybe in the ERSA symposium last year, it was brought up that there's over 2,200 strings available on the market. And certainly you don't want an inventory of 2,200 different strings. So you've got to find out what's popular and what's selling. And you also have to be a salesman. If you want to get a great multi-filament string and say you want Wilson NXT, and someone comes to you and says, yeah, I'd like Technofiber X1 biphase. Well, you've got to explain to them that, NXT is an amazing string. You're going to find a lot of comfort in this string, just like you would in NXT. And, try to sell them on that. I wouldn't recommend, purchasing all of the top 5 or 10 different multifilaments on the market. I would get 1 or 2. And if someone is such a stickler about wanting their exact string, they're probably going to come to you with their string and say, hey, I'd like you to string my
Yeah.
rack. Here's my string.
You're choosing these strings. If you look at a string that has good tension maintenance on, playability, historically, like it's over generation, like NXT, it's a proven winner, I guess. That's the place I like to go. I go to Tennis Warehouse University and I check out a lot of those strings. I'll look at like, okay, what are some top strings that I'm looking at? Maybe I'll look at one category, because the thing is, you want to really balance your mix out. It's really going to be between 4 different things, right? It's going to be between natural gut, it's going to be between synthetic monofilaments, it's going to be between the synthetic multifilaments, and then the polyester monofilament strings. So those are going to be all of your strings are going to be based on those 4, and then your hybrids will come in between, some of those components. So you've got to just figure out what percentages out of, let's say you can buy 5 strings or you can buy 10 strings. Once you choose that, and you go, okay, natural gut will be a very small portion of your string mix. If you just have one natural gut string and you consistently keep that in stock, that should be sufficient, because number one is you don't want to be stuck with, gut for 3-4 years, and then you don't want cheap gut that is going to break all the time. But you need to carry some type of natural gut, even if it's only a couple sets, and then replenish that as you need. So let's take take us to Tennis Warehouse site, because I like to use them kind of as a benchmark for what's available on the market that is available from a number of manufacturers and sellers, and also what's currently available, not on closeout. I know they have closeouts, but a lot of times the closeouts are discounted, so you know it's a closeout. But I like to use that just as as a general price guide. I'll use that as a benchmark, right? Because
Yeah.
they're so big, as far as the retail pricing. So I'll go on there. I'll look at, okay, so if I'm going to be looking at, let's say, natural gut, I'll just click on natural gut, and all of the natural gut companies that at least they offer will come up, and then you can kind of look at the prices. And yes, I mean, we would all love to have VS Touch 16 and 17 gauge in our inventory, but are we going to want to pay $51.95? I think that's the current going price for one set, and then hold on to that for a while. If we're new, maybe we want to get something that's a little more cost effective as far as natural gut. There's Clip gut, or there's Vocal has some decent gut. Wilson's got some gut that's, I think, a little bit less cost.
Yeah.
But so you can look at all those different factors, and all those are I think going to get the job done. So I mean, that's kind of how I would start approaching it, as far as as far as the natural gut. And then again, with the polys, you can do the same thing. Just go on there,
Yeah.
what people are talking about. You want to know what they're talking about, and then maybe kind of look at, okay, well, so how can I at least make sure I cover that in my strings, so that, because that's what people are going to be asking for, what they see and what they hear about, what they're talking about. There's a site that I just found that actually has what the players, what ATP and WT players use, what type of string that they use, and it has a list of hundreds of players and what strings they use. Now, of course, these are the strings that they promote, that the companies promote specifically. That doesn't always mean that the players are actually using that specific string that's listed. Like if they're sponsored by Luxilon, of course it's going to list Luxilon, Big Banger, Loop, Power, or whatever might be their string that they're promoting. But in reality, they might be playing with another Luxilon, or with even maybe they're playing with Polyfiber or some other Babylats. So you never know for sure. But as far as those are the strings that are the information that's publicly available, and a lot of people look to that and go, oh yeah, wow, this is the player that I like and I follow, and so, oh wow, what are they playing with? And okay, seems to be working for them. But of course, we know that that's not the best way to choose your own strings, but a lot of people do that, right? They look at what's
Sure.
out there, and that's just what they hear. And sometimes what's on sale, right? They'll get, if they sign up for email lists from different companies like Tennis Warehouse and maybe Tennis Express, or just other names online, and they'll get emails like, oh hey, this is on sale, and then you start doing your research, and a lot of people say, oh, this is a good string, or this is. So there's no way that you're going to be able to offer what everybody wants. You're not going to be able to please everybody as far as the exact strings. So the idea is to be able to carry the string in these four different categories that are proven winners, that have good tension maintenance. Because if you have a comparable string of something that somebody is looking for, and your string has better tension maintenance and maybe more spin, that's how you're going to sell that string.
Yeah.
So you can check all that information out on the Tennis Warehouse University site, because they have done a lot of reviews, and they've done a lot of tests, lab tests on these strings, and you can kind of compare, like in another video, how I did that, looking for the 5 stiffest poly strings, and that you can easily break that down. And again, you can easily break down, the best strings that have the best tension maintenance. And so, that's where I like to start, because those are the strings that are not going to, lose tension. They're going to play consistently for a lot longer period than some strings that are going to lose 50% tension in, a matter of a week after you string it. So, they could have all the hype around them, but ultimately they're not going to perform well. So that's kind of I think a place where I would start. So the way that I have it broken down is, I have gut. I would carry less than 10% of my inventory with gut, maybe even 5%. And I would I would cover my synthetics. I would have about 20 to 30% in the monofilament synthetics. Probably 2 to 3 different types, like
Yeah.
Prince. Like Prince Duraflex would be one. Maybe Gamma TNT or Gamma Livewire, maybe, or something like that. And
Yeah.
then I would also consider. I think. Wait, Livewire, is that a multifilament? No, I think that's a monofilament. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's been
yeah, I
around
don't
a
remember.
long time, and I
Yeah, I
can't
don't remember.
remember.
That's an old one. Yeah, that's an old one. But and then maybe another one that's maybe a little bit more popular, right? So that's I would do that. And then for the multifilaments, that would also be about 20 to 30%. I would maybe have three of those, like the Wilson NXT. The NXT line, there's what, 5 or 6, 7
Oh,
different
yeah.
strings in the NXT line, but they're not all the same as far as if you compare them all, you can see that there's a few that hold tension a lot better. There are some NXTs that do not hold tension well. And so the standard, NXT without any of the other labels behind it, or just I guess, what do you call it? The original NXT is is a good winner. It's a proven winner. You can't go wrong with that. And I think, there's Yonex has a few good strings that are multifilaments, and Yonex is a pretty popular brand these days. So a lot of people know the Yonex strings. Uh, I could do without a Prince multifilament. Prince, I don't really
Right.
need Premier or any of those, the strings that they have. They're not really anything I would necessarily need to have. Maybe a uh, Gosen. Gosen has a couple good multifilaments. So it
Head.
just depends on. Yeah, Head has a few as well. And so some of those, if you have a mix from different brands, because sometimes people are just really brand conscious about, oh yeah, I use Head strings, or I use this. So at least you have some options
Yep.
that way. Don't just stock up all in one brand. And then I think the rest of the mix, kind of the 30 to 50%,
Polyester.
would be the polyester strings, exactly, because that is going to be, everybody wants to have either a hybrid, have poly with the hybrid, or have full bed poly in their racket. So I'd carry a little bit more along the poly line. Now, of course, if your whole market is recreational players, and maybe having strings in all those 4 categories, and then breaking them down into a percentage, and kind of go with that model. And then you have to figure out, do you want 16 gauge, 17 gauge, 18 gauge? Maybe you can do a mix, of those.
Yeah, typically with the polyesters, I'll go 1.2 to 1.25 gauge string, a little bit thinner, just because of the arm issues. And then for the multi-filaments, typically I'll do like 1.3, which is normally a 16 gauge.
Mhm.
I do carry Wilson Sensation in 1.35, which is 15 gauge, because I do get some good players who want a hybrid, coming back from arm injuries, whatnot. So I want to put a thicker multi-filament in their crosses, with the poly and the mains, just to give them a little extra life out of it. And it's still a soft string. You can string it a little looser if you want to. But I do like having a thicker multi, just in case you do want someone wants a multi that breaks a lot of strings, and they don't want to break it once or twice a week. So give them a couple weeks out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I don't typically go below 16 gauge in most. I do like 17 multi-filament, especially if I'm doing a hybrid,
Yeah.
because if you're putting the multi-filament in the crosses, withstand thinner gauges,
That's
and then
true. And just remember that the gauges are not, there's no standard. So
yeah,
16 gauge in head might be a different than 16 gauge with Wilson.
yeah,
That's why I
yeah.
always go by
It's
1.2, 1.2.
Yeah, 132, or maybe even a 128.
Yeah.
And especially when you're starting to get with the thinner strings, and you're talking about 17 and 17 light, and then you're talking 18 gauge. and so it makes more sense. The
Solinco
metric system.
17 is 1.20. His Solinco
Mhm.
17 gauge is 1.20, and then a lot of the other companies' 17 gauges are
120.
1.25.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
you
So
get
that's a good point.
16L too now. Some are doing 16L, which is 1.25. So
Mhm.
it's
You
good
know,
to look.
I used to use that the metric more when I talked about strings, but most people know the other, the standard
True.
system, and so I ended up just kind of going with that. But yeah, it's definitely, if I'm fine tuning what type of string I want to put in, I will generally be looking at the metrics, because it,
Yeah.
it makes so much difference. And I do like to go thinner on the polys, 17 and 18. Some of the Luxilon, I mean, Luxilon has a really large offering of poly strings, and you can, if you look at, if you add in Luxilon and you add in Solinco and you add in maybe a few others, I mean, you can go as low as 19 gauge, or 1.10. I think 1.10 is like the lowest that I've seen as a tennis string, or
Probably.
1.12. And so
Yeah.
you could go that thin, but it's not always recommended, because those are going to snap pretty easy if you're a solid hitter. But and some of those really lighter strings aren't always going to be the best playable option either. Just depends on what the string is. So you got to really look at the gauge, when you're looking at all that. But yeah, so that's definitely something to consider, the gauge. And so now, you could be looking at double or tripling your inventory just by
Yeah.
offering it in different gauges, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, are you going to buy it in reels, or are you going to buy it in sets?
Yeah, well, you're going to save money in reels, but you're also going to be stuck with, 16, 17
Right.
rackets worth of string.
Right.
And so but I
If
guess it
it's a
just depends, if you're if you know you're going to be using it, then get the reel.
Yeah, if it's a fad string where you're like, oh, a couple people have talked about this string. Oh, I should probably carry it. If it's something like that and you're just not too sure on it, buy yourself maybe four sets. Just
Right.
don't buy just one, because if the player has, let's say the player has two rackets,
Yeah.
you know, or you know, you've got a player who just wants one, but then later on they go, oh yeah, I like this. I want my other racket done in this, or then you get somebody else. It's good to at least have, I mean, start with four sets.
Sure.
Don't just start with one set. Um, and so, I mean, that's one way that you could try that. And then if it ends up being like, wow, everybody's asking for this, then go out and get that reel. But otherwise, you might, if you're just not sure, you might be stuck. You
And you
know,
can get mini
um,
reels too in a lot of
yeah.
cases. So
And nowadays you can get reels pretty much in most of the strings come in reels, even the multi-filaments. Years past, multi-filaments never really came in reels, but you can get reels in NXT and Sensation.
with the
The only thing
exception
you
of natural gut, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, right, with the exception of natural gut, you're not going to find that in a reel, but everything else you're pretty much going to find the reel. And the reels that I would go after would be the 660, the full reels, not the half reels, or the 200 meter reels. I would go with, because really, if you're going to go with the reels and save the money, buy the standard reels, which usually are either 600 feet, 660 feet, sometimes 720 feet. Those are, I
Right.
think, the three different. And so those are different as far as you really want to price wise. Make sure that, divide it by, 40 feet, and figure out the best price, because sometimes you can definitely get a benefit. Now, sometimes when you buy sets, you can buy four and get one free when they have sales, and so that makes things actually cheaper, as well. I mean, there's other factors sometimes why you want to get a reel, but when you're starting out or you're building your inventory, maybe don't worry about reels, because that $200 that you put down for a reel of one string, one gauge, you could distribute it between three or four possibly different offerings.
Yeah. Right.
All right, so we talked a lot about kind of getting your inventory together and what to look for. Tennis Industry Magazine, see what's going on there as far as what they're offering and what's being promoted. Go on to some of the retailers or wholesalers.
Yep.
Yeah, go over some of the retailers or wholesalers and kind of see what different offerings you have. And that way you can kind of get an idea of what's out there.